And the best thing, the very best thing of all, is there's time now. There's all the time I need and all the time I want. Time, time, time. Ah, there's time enough at last.
Hello, and welcome to the Twilight Pwn, the internet's podcast that talks about the Twilight Zone that a fair amount of people like. My name is John. I'm joined by my co-host, Fred.
Hello.
How you doing this week, Fred?
Our rise through the ranks has really thrown off our branding.
Right.
I feel like we should have engineered it to stay at number 3 forever.
Yeah.
Well, I'm doing fine. I mean, we're recording this one out of order, so I feel like if I say that we had our first big snow day in New York, that's just going to seem weird when we release this.
By the time this releases, we'll be really in the home stretch.
Oh, man, yeah. You know, any predictions for the future of like 4 months from now?
I predict the Steelers will not make the Super Bowl this year. I'm going to go ahead and put that one on the line.
Right. All hail President Trump beyond that.
Right.
I would make a prediction about my sports team, but I fear you'd shut it down very quickly because it involves...
Right, they're going to win the bowling hat cup.
Exactly. There are some sort of oddly named trophies in British soccer. One of the lower league trophies is called the Johnson's Paint Cup or something.
Sure. The Lori Lou is a big one, of course.
The Pheasant Cup. Enough lighthearted banter. Let's get down to brass tacks here. We've been doing this podcast for 3 years, and I feel like we've like just been building up the muscle to tackle a giant like this.
Well, you know, for a long time, we were in such a rush. We were so
Right.
hectic, we couldn't get to it, but we finally got time enough at last.
3 years in.
We've been at the whiteboard trying to get that joke nailed down perfectly for 3 years. So we're going to discuss Time Enough at Last. A first season episode. It was the 8th of the production run. It aired originally on November 20th, 1959.
Witness Mr. Henry Bemis, a charter member in the Fraternity of Dreamers. A bookish little man whose passion is the printed page, but who is conspired against by a bank president and a wife and a world full of tongue cluckers and the unrelenting hands of a clock. But in just a moment, Mr. Bemis will enter a world without bank presidents, or wives, or clocks, or anything else. He'll have a world all to himself, without anyone.
Would that world be the Twilight Zone, Rod?
But he'll be alone in the zone. It's the Twilight Zone.
Yeah. The no bank president or wife zone.
No clucking. Yes.
I mean, we'll probably get to this when we discuss the episode further, but the emotional tone of that intro is weird because it's kind of like, he'll be completely alone. And then the music is like, da, 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 like the Bemis show.
Right. There's some issues throughout, you know, having Henry Bemis as our lead.
Yes,
Interesting choice.
That's like a dog whistle to the host of the Twilight Pwn. Anything approximating Beavis is going to get us going. Anyway, we like to write our own Serling-style intros.
For folks who are just jumping on to the show with a couple episodes left,
Yes. As part of our tradition, we like to write them very close before we start recording, so keep that in mind. It's a charming tradition to not do them that well. I don't know. Do you want to go first? You want me to go first? Okay,
Sure. I'll go ahead. Meet one Henry Bemis. A man riding high on the edge of a big breakdown. A mind-numbing job, a wife with a voice that could cut glass, and no time to follow his preferred pursuit of pursuing pages of periodicals or publications. A broken man who can no longer see life's glasses as half full. Like an out-of-control car with cut brakes and barreling into a glass house. After a short break from our sponsors, we will raise a glass to one Mr. Bemis in the broken glass. Twilight Zone. Twilight Zone.
Very spoiler-heavy intro from you. Although mine's no better.
What you talking about?
Here we go. A Mr. Henry Beam was afraid to read. He packed his suitcase with books indeed. He waited his whole damn life for his wife to explode. But when his glasses broke, he thought, well, doesn't this blow? And isn't it ironic? Don't you think? It's like a plane with a gremlin on the wing. It's like a sexy dame who says ring-a-ding-ding. It's like the witch doctor totem that you just didn't bring. And who would have thought? It's the Twilight Zone.
Not many Twilight Zone song parodies work in those jungle references. I think that's just, proximity.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, well, I have to hit Nightmare at 20,000 Feet, Ring-a-Ding Girl, and, the jungle.
I didn't know quite what that was at first. The first couple lines, I wasn't really sure, and it sounded like it was like, is this kind of like an 80s sitcom? He's going obscure. Is this like The Facts of Life or something? What is this?
Anyway, this is a first season episode of the show. You can stream it, and you should stream it if you don't want it to be spoiled. On Netflix, you can buy the Blu-rays and the DVDs. Unfortunately, Hulu no longer streams them for free.
You should also kind of disconnect from pop culture right now if you somehow haven't had it spoiled yet and don't want it to be.
Yeah.
There's nobody who's found their way to a Twilight Zone podcast who doesn't know the end, but sure.
You've made your way to episode 150 of a Twilight Zone podcast, but you don't know how this episode ends. I'd like to meet you. Please, write in.
Please, send us an email, yes.
Yeah. But anyway, we are about to spoil it, so you've been warned. The first scene opens. We're in a bank, and there's a teller, Henry Bemis. He's conducting some business with a book in his lap, kind of like the 1960s equivalent of like keeping two browsers open at work, something I'm quite familiar with. Anyway, moving right along. Bemis is played by Burgess Meredith in his fourth appearance that we've talked about on the Twilight Zone.
But first on the show.
True. Right off the bat, based on his name and also the glasses that he has, he's got these incredibly thick, high prescription glasses.
Right.
You can kind of tell that they're setting a bit of a wacky tone right off the bat.
Are those the glasses from 4 o'clock? Can we confirm or deny that?
My guess is that it's just kind of like a type of prop. You know what I mean? Like they have like wacky nerd glasses.
The show might actually be able to afford more than one pair of goofy Coke bottle glasses. Yeah. It's not like an improv group.
It's like you cut forward to the episode at 4 o'clock and you're like, why are those lenses very obviously glued together? No, I think they're just the same. I mean, they look very similar. We should do like a Hot or Not on the Tumblr prop edition. But, they're very thick Coke bottle glasses. His name's Bemis, kind of a goofy name. So you kind of, you know what you're up against. And Bemis gets a customer at his window, and instead of dealing properly with her financial transaction, which just seems to be her asking him to make change, like it's a little bit weird, like to go into your bank and like, could you break a 20? But he does it wrong, and the reason why is he's too focused on spoiling the plot of David Copperfield for her.
They want our sympathies to lie with Bemis, I believe, but I don't know, the cold hard pragmatist here couldn't help but be annoyed on the woman's behalf. She's like, basically like, you shortchanged me again while you were reading while doing your work. Like, I'd be kind of annoyed.
Yeah, it's like, oh, delightful Bemis, you just deleted my account.
Right. I think there's weird rules about real money and film and stuff, but did that currency seem not US-ish to you? I mean, I don't know how much money has changed in the last 50 years, but it seemed very different than what we're used to working with.
I mean, this episode definitely has the stink of Canada about it, for sure. He's screwing up this transaction and kind of recounting the plot some highlights from David Copperfield for this woman.
Do you feel like Serling was kind of saying, hey, it's okay that I name him Henry Bemis, because look, Dickens had some really on-the-nose names. Yeah. It's okay.
No, he does read aloud some of the characters' names, and it's like Mr. Pushpull and like
Mr. Mortar or whatever.
Yeah. I don't know David Copperfield that well, do you?
No, I've actually only read one Dickens. That's one of my kind of blind spots that I've meant to get better at.
I was kind of thinking is there some interesting significance to that choice of book? But clearly we're not the people to offer insight into that. So
the clip isn't working. I don't know.
Bemis's boss oversees this little interaction and is quite cheesed about it. So he calls Bemis into his office. Serling delivers his intro while that's happening, and then we get back. And
Serling delivers the boss's dialogue directly to him. Yes. And we get a clip of it.
Now, Mr. Bemis, I shall come to the point of this interview. I shall arrive via the following route, which is namely, what constitutes an efficient member of this organization, viz., a bank teller who knows his job and performs it, i.e., an organization man who functions within an organization. You, Mr. Bemis, do not function within the organization. You are neither an efficient bank teller nor a proficient employee. You, Mr. Bemis, are a reader.
A reader?
A reader.
Yes.
A reader of books, magazines, periodicals, newspapers. I see you constantly going downstairs into the vault during your lunch hour. Ultimatum, Mr. Bemis.
Yes, sir.
You will henceforth devote your time to your job and forget reading, or you'll find yourself outdoors on a park bench reading from morning till night for want of having a job. Do I make myself perfectly clear?
In the Twilight Zone.
Kind of.
Yeah. Yeah, there's at the beginning is like, I'm about to explain to you by necessitation the justifications of what I'm going to now be saying here now. Like okay.
Let me get right down to it. In a little while after I put this law...
He's like, you're a Rita. And he's like, wait, what?
And again, I think we can side with Bemis on that. Like, huh?
Yeah.
Is that a thing?
It's kind of like shades of like Joe Pesci and My Cousin Vinny. It's like, the Utes.
I just kind of am picturing him on a like 20-foot tall podium at this point when he's like, you're a Rita, Mr. Wordsworth.
Yeah. Bemis gets kicked out. And in the next scene, he's at home. And he's trying to get through the evening paper. And his wife comes in and rips the paper out of his hand. And
yeah, she gives a real like sitcom-y. Apparently they have like a suet pig out there named Henry too.
Maybe like early on in the Twilight Zone they were thinking Henry would be like a catchphrase of the Twilight Zone. People say Serling had a hard time writing female characters.
And I give them Exhibit A.
Yes,
no,
exactly.
sir.
Yes, yeah. Anyway, they're going to go play cards that night, so Bemis can't waste any time reading the paper. He's got to go get ready. But before he leaves, he kind of grabs a little stash of contraband from underneath his couch pillow. A little something for the road, a little nip to get me through the night. But before he can sneak it out of the house, Officer Wife pats him down and finds the shiv, which is a book of modern poetry.
A grown man who reads silly, ridiculous, nonsensical doggerel.
This isn't doggerel. There's some very beautiful things here.
I say it's doggerel. I also say it's a waste of time.
Helen, don't do that for Helen, please don't do
See
that.
the Dr. Phil episode where the Henry Bemis and his wife were on. It's really powerful.
Maybe CBS had like doggerel quotas.
Yeah.
The Twilight Zone filled it in their first season. They're doing everything they can to get Bemis on our side, but like that's a pretty insanely horrible wife.
Yeah.
Like, if my partner like caught me reading literature or poetry and then X'd it out and then tore it up.
Yeah. We didn't really mention the fact that when she confiscates the poetry book from him, she like kind of suckers him into this idea of like, oh, let's sit down and read your stupid poetry. And then he opens up the book and she's like gone to the level of like Xing out every page.
Right, like that's serial killer stuff.
Exactly. That's not just like mean wife.
There's no couples counseling for that.
Yeah.
You know?
That's like 7, basically.
Right.
The next step is like cutting off his finger in the middle of the night.
Exactly.
But, yeah, I don't know. It's
so yeah, I mean we sympathize with Bemis, I suppose.
I guess. One thing I want to do throw out, I like the wife's outfit. It's kind of like a cool pattern dress, kind of like a Brooklyn style dress.
That's a little much for me, that dress. I'm a nice middle America guy.
Yes. I like a good sackcloth dress.
A nice beige sackcloth.
Yeah. In the next scene, Bemis is back at the bank and he's on his lunch break and he wants to finally get some peace and quiet, and so he's going to sneak down into the bank vault so he can finally be alone. And he sneaks down there, he finishes David Copperfield, and then he cracks open a paper. And the paper has the rather startling and somewhat nonsensical headline, H-bomb capable of total destruction, which is a weird headline. It's
headline?
Like, yeah. It's like if the New York Times' like main headline was like, atom bombs are still powerful. Like, it's not...
Machine guns, awesome.
Odd. They also reuse this paper, I think, in What You Need or something. There's like a weird scene where he's like using the racing form in a paper, and it's this one. So they did use some props. But mainly what we need to talk about is, did you do your scan for...
Yeah, I ran it through the lab, had a look at it.
Yeah.
Nothing good.
Yeah, I will say this, though, and final time we'll probably discuss this, but often in 50s and 60s TV shows, especially the Twilight Zone, they used fake news headlines to fill out these fake papers. And the two big ones that we always look for are new petitions against tax and building code under fire, neither of which is present on this paper. However, there was a headline that said, strong opposition to proposed tax legislation.
Yeah, I saw it. And it excited me a bit, but...
It's working up to a petition. There's an opposition right now to the tax, but there's no petition yet. Just as soon as he reads this headline, there's a blast that knocks the book out of his hands, it rocks the bank vault up and down.
Yeah, did you notice there was a weird thing that happened where he had like a clock or a stopwatch, I forget at the moment, and it broke just like right before the big impact?
Yeah, I didn't quite get that. There was also like some wind like blew the pages of his book over, which doesn't really make sense.
It just made me think, like, if that was rooted in some sort of science that was that the electromagnetic pulse taking out his, like, completely mechanical stopwatch? Like,
I don't know. I don't think we have to hold this episode to, like, absolute verisimilitude. The nuclear blast knocks over this page of Bemis's book, destroys his stopwatch, and rocks the episode into commercial. And when we get back, Bemis sort of, like, crawls his way out of the vault. There's kind of a clever shot here where his glasses have been knocked off and you see how blind he is without them, but he sort of feels
foreshadowing.
Feels his way out of the vault, puts his glasses back on, and sees a landscape of total destruction. There's a kind of gruesome moment where Bemis hears his boss's voice and is thinking, oh, maybe he's alive, and then we slowly pan down and we see it's like his boss's like dead fingers, and they're near like a dictaphone that's just reeling off this memo that he must have recorded right before the bomb went off.
Kind of imagine that's how Serling dreamed he'd go one day, dictaphone firmly in hand.
Yeah, exactly. So Bemis is wandering through this post-apocalyptic landscape, which is, I think, pretty well put together. You know, I feel like often in shows of, you know, an anthology nature that didn't have a huge budget, the apocalypse is just like a kind of a big mess, you know.
I felt like the production design was really good on this. They're pretty early in the run. Maybe this is before CBS realized like what they were getting themselves into. And while Bemis is wandering through this landscape,
Serling comes on and tells him to make tracks, Mr. Bemis.
Seconds, minutes, hours. They crawl by on hands and knees for Mr. Henry Bemis, who looks for a spark in the ashes of a dead world. A telephone connected to nothingness. A neighborhood bar, a movie, a baseball diamond, a hardware store. The mailbox of what was once his house and is now a rubble. They lie at his feet as battered monuments to what was but is no more. Mr. Henry Bemis on an 8-hour tour of a graveyard.
In the Twilight Zone. It's not really necessary, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's kind of like...
Definitely not.
Okay, Mr. Bemis, then walk over there. Now we see Mr. Bemis looking at this thing that's depressing. Like, it's a little bit like, we get it, Rod.
Maybe that was like the network being a little nervous about how long they could go without having any dialogue. I mean, television is generally like, it is really an oral, A-U-R-A-L medium.
Yeah.
Like, even today, a lot of television shows are written so that you can watch them like while cooking dinner and not miss a beat. I'm guessing that maybe freaked out some execs to have a guy just wandering around wreckage for like 3 minutes.
Yeah. When we do this show, we constantly encounter like little things when we read trivia about how the network was like nervous that the audience wouldn't get it, and like it just like to the point of requiring the narrator of the show to explain to you what's happening at every second. Now this character is going to read in a vault down there. I don't know. Anyway,
he takes stock of things, and you know, we get what was actually the original title of this episode.
I'm not going to starve to death anyway. Lots of food. Food enough to last for years and years and years and years.
Food enough to last. It was going to be good.
Yeah. There's time now to eat.
It's just found a store of cans and cans of chicken, chicken wings.
Yeah, exactly. Apparently he hasn't talked to the old man in the cave yet, but right now he's enjoying a hearty banana potato, and there's like a little like can of beer too right there, and there's like cigarettes, so he's kind of like, I got everything I need. I'm a 50s man. I'm in heaven.
Right.
Bemis also finds a dilapidated old couch, and he settles down on that and ruminates on how man cannot live on beer and cigarettes alone. The sort of, you know, the episode's kind of getting progressively darker, which will happen when you put a nuclear bomb in the middle of it.
The worst part, the very worst part is being alone. Is this how it's going to be? Just sitting around day after day, eating, smoking a cigarette, reading the same half of a newspaper over and over again.
I feel like like if you trade out, reading half a newspaper to surfing the internet and like a cigarette for a vape pen. You got a lot of people nowadays leading that lifestyle.
Yeah.
I think he right there drifts off to sleep. I'm pretty sure he's got a lit cigarette that just falls in his coat pocket. Like, did you notice that?
No. Huh.
It made me really nervous. I thought that was like a forgotten beat of this episode, that he woke up on fire. I was like, how much are we going to dump on this guy?
Yeah, that was the original end twist of this. And he lit himself on fire. Good night.
He burned to death. Isn't it ironic? And people were like, what? Because he didn't like fire. You get it.
He opened up one of the cans and there was a nuclear bomb inside of it. It gets even darker as we keep going because Bemis is, wandering through this landscape. He's lonely. He doesn't have a reason to live. And then he chances upon a sporting goods store and finds a gun. There's kind of like is this a dirty gun I see before me moment where he...
Wither Bemis, yes.
Exactly. It kind of makes me think, like, do they sell guns in sporting goods stores, like, loaded?
Maybe the blast knocked the bullets into the chamber.
This is solitude. I've never had much solitude. I have enough to occupy my mind and my time. I have enough food, and I'm really very fortunate. Yes, I'm really extremely fortunate. Help! 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 Someone, please!
Nice moment. It's kind of rare that you get a character who's like one of Serling's like quote unquote comedy characters who elicits a genuine emotion, and I feel like that speech in particular is one of...
When you have a weak character scared, that's one of the things that'll tug at get an emotional reaction out of me pretty quick. It's like the whimpering puppy thing. It's just sad.
Yeah.
Hearing
we all know how much you love puppies.
Well, I like to hear them whimper.
Yeah, I like to see them helpless. Who doesn't?
I didn't say what kind of reaction it gets out of me, Fred.
Arousal. Yeah, no, it's a good moment, and it's the kind of thing you're not going to get out of Luther Dingle. You know what I mean? Like, Bemis does not kill himself because just as he's about to pull the trigger, he sees a sign for a public library that's obviously been decimated by the bomb, but is still there nonetheless.
Because nothing's going to survive a blast better than paper-bound books.
Yeah, it is a little bit like selective what survived this nuclear blast. All of these books survived, or many of these books survived, and
all the Janet Ivanovich is okay.
Yeah, exactly. He's like Shakespeare, Shelley, Shaw. He's got very like highfalutin taste. He's not like Brown, Ivanovich. All the erotic novels my heart can handle. He's very excited about all of this, and he starts like stacking up the books month by month, which I thought was kind of a cool little visual.
Reveals an OCD side to his character that we didn't know about.
His name is Henry Bemis. I mean, he sort of casually mentions the title of the episode. I don't know. I guess we've already played that clip, but it's like, finally there's time enough. Time enough at last.
TEAL.
Yeah, exactly. YOLO.
That famous acronym.
Yeah. But as he's reaching over to get started on his very first book, we get a shocking twist, because it turns out his first book is a cookbook. His glasses fall off and break instantaneously.
That's why you want to get that high index frame. You get the polycarbonate, you don't have that problem.
You don't normally make like glasses lenses out of break glass, like
candy glass. Yeah,
exactly. But he's blind as a bat without them. We see like his perspective, and he can't see a damn thing.
I got a little clip here.
That's not fair. That's not fair at all. There was time now. There was all the time I needed. That's not fair. That's not fair.
I really buy into this just because that's just like such a sad, wimpy reaction to like this horror, just being like, not fair, not fair. It makes me even more empathetic to him.
No, I hear you. I mean, I think just Burgess does a good job with it, basically. That moment has the potential for him to be going like, why? And like slowly pan away and a church bell rings. But it's kind of understated in a nice way. It's like a lifelong loser experiences one final loss, and
Serling's there to dance on his grave.
Yes, exactly. Pack that dirt in real tight.
The best laid plans of mice and men, and Henry Bemis, the small man in the glasses who wanted nothing but time. Henry Bemis, now just a part of a smashed landscape. Just a piece of the rubble. Just a fragment of what man has deeded to himself. Mr. Henry Bemis in the Twilight Zone.
Yeah, once again, that music felt a little weird. It's like live from the Kodak Theater, Mr. Henry Bemis. Anyway, yeah, that is the episode, as it were. One of the things that's interesting about it is that the composition of it is very strange. Because at the beginning, you think it's going to be one of Serling's like wacky episode where he finds like a quarter on the sidewalk that makes his ears really big, you know. But then it gets dark and then very dark, and then the end is potentially one of the most cruel endings of any Twilight Zone episode. It really is just like, let's kick Mr. Bemis while he's down. Most people don't even, I think when they think of this episode, they just think of the twist, but I was almost like surprised to rewatch it and be like, oh wow, this really feels Dingle-esque in the first 10 minutes, you know?
Yeah. I had forgotten when the bomb drop happens. I guess I was a little surprised that it happened at the halfway point. I felt like, in my memory, the bomb drop happens like with about 5 minutes left, and he just wanders around, and the glasses break almost automatically. And then, so I was thinking like, I know there's 20 minutes before, but I think it's just him being like a goofball for 20 minutes. Like, I couldn't really remember any of that, so it was good to go back, and I feel like it's pretty fleshed out as far as the beats that happen after the atomic bomb drops. But I do agree it's very bifurcated. You've kind of got like it could go a penny for your thoughts at any minute, but then it the bomb drops and suddenly it's like 2 or something, but like grimmer.
Well, it's more grim than that. It's like they glued like I shot an arrow onto Mr. Dingle and called it an episode. It's very weird. What do you think about the twist? It's definitely either the most famous or one of the most famous twists of the entire series.
Yeah, I'd say it's this or Cookbook. Take your pick.
Do you think he's being punished for something, or is it more just like the nature of fate? It's cruel.
No. I think the episode does everything it can to put us in his corner. And make him sympathetic. I mean, the only thing that he arguably does wrong is like he's just too into reading, but I don't believe that Serling or whatever the like point of view of this episode is anti-reading. So if I'm being nice, I think it's just kind of a cruel twist of fate that's like kind of ironic black humor, but it's also there is something of just like, how mean can I be to my main character? Like I'm gonna step out of like the verbal insult realm and just really I'm gonna do some physical comedy in this episode.
I'm not just gonna call him a rotten flea, but an excuse of So basically, then the meaning of this episode is just kind of like, life's a bitch. Like,
I do
shrug
think,
emoji.
I think it's just kind of like sometimes the universe can be very cruel. Like, I mean, you have to pile on so much. It's almost cartoonish how beat down they make him, but then it almost like it makes it semi-plausible that he could maybe find some kind of peace in an apocalypse. Like, he has his moments of desperation, he has his almost suicide moment, but it is plausible that like give this guy a good book and he maybe could make it, since his life pre the bomb was so terrible.
Why do you think this episode is as iconic as it is?
The twist is something that's really easily digestible. You can put it in a sentence, and I think, it helps that Burgess, his acting in the first half is like cartoonish, but that's, that's what they're asking him to do. I would have liked if they could have dialed that all back a little bit and softened the wife a little bit. But I do think once the bomb drops, he has to do a couple of, like I said, beats of kind of shock and then kind of acceptance and then despair and then, a little light at the end of the tunnel and then ultimate despair. Like, he's playing a number of beats all strung up in the span of like 10 minutes. I think he does a really good job, but that's just maybe what gives it a little bit more lasting power. I think what made it get into the cultural zeitgeist, I think, is just the fact that you have like a one-line twist you can relate to people. That's like very visual, very direct.
It's kind of as close as we have to like a modern Aesop fable, and I mean, I think that a lot of people read the Twilight Zone that way. One of the things I actually like about having done this podcast, or being close to having done this podcast, is that like we kind of like get to rewatch all the plots and experience them more as like full narratives. But I also think that like to some degree, part of the reason why the show has lasted as long as it has and been as popular as it has is that like they're kind of like Aesop fables, and this one is certainly the most like that. It's like got a very clear little nugget in it that like encapsulates something about life that is like really easy to.
Aren't fables generally have some kind of like teaching aspect to them? Like I'm not sure this.
Well, this is
kind of what we were saying
I
just
think
a minute
like
ago.
you know, life is cruel as a. I mean, it's not. And Brer Rabbit committed suicide.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, it's a dark lesson, but I think it's true. You know what I mean?
Yeah. This happens.
Comedy podcast, folks.
I did read something that I thought was interesting. That was just talking about, you know, do you have like a Kindle or an e-reader of some sort?
I do not. Sorry. Go on.
Okay, well, you won't be able to relate.
Okay.
But
I
know you
I'll
all.
just turn off my ears.
I'll just be reading my artisanal books that I got from the, what is it called? The Renaissance Book Festival you go to every year.
Book Fair. And,
exactly.
Yeah, anyway, go on.
But just the point that like we're actually kind of on a path towards a lot of people, you know, dealing with this Bemis situation as like, you know, I've got tons of books still, but I've dumped a lot of books for like electronic versions. A lot of people have their content electronically. And so if there was ever a disaster that wiped out all electronics everywhere.
Yeah, I think that's like
would,
somewhat overstated. In recent years, like ebooks have kind of flattened in terms of sales. And so I think people will still keep producing physical books. I don't think we'll ever get to the point where like a hacker can like delete Charles Dickens or whatever, but I do think it's an interesting idea. Yeah. Another reason it's found popularity, or like a smaller reason it's found popularity, is that I think that like the kind of person who's likely to be interested in a cult TV show from like 50 years ago is probably gonna also be a reader. And I think like to some degree like people are like, I'm just like Henry Bemis. I wish I had all the time to read all these books, but I never do. And I know that that's not the point of the episode. Like the books are a metaphor, but I do think it makes people like this. One thing that's interesting about it is that there's really not that much about like literature or books, or it's all treated very cartoonishly. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, it's surfacey.
Yeah.
You know, you have a character who loves literature. That's somewhat unusual just in general in a television medium.
You kind of never know with Serling whether he's making his characters like likably pathetic or just pathetic. You know what I mean?
Right.
And it's like Bemis really rides that line, you know? He's not a hero.
No, he's certainly not, but I do think we're supposed to be
You're supposed to be on his
somewhat
side,
in his corner.
Yeah.
That's the best I think we can say for him. Is the ending actually ironic?
God, I hate this. This was like... I
remember, I imagine you read a heartbreaking work of Staggering Genius.
I did. Is there some bit about that? Or
there's like in the appendix that if you flip the book over and read it in like a footnote, you know, in the very postmodern-y thing, he does like a very long essay on how people misuse the word irony. And that's from a book that's like, you know, 15 years old. So we've only gotten further down. I mean, we left misuse of irony in the dust long ago. We're now even past screwing up literally. So
I know. I just remember like when I don't know, like the Alanis Morissette song "Ironic" came out. There was like I heard some story on the radio like way back when that was like the American Council of Irony has ruled that the song is only 62% ironic. It's like I think people get what irony means in broad strokes. Like I think the technical definition is when you expect something to be one way and it turns out it's the other. The problem is that that's so general and vague. It's like, well, he expected to be happy by reading these books and then he couldn't. So is that not ironic, or is it?
Right.
You know, I don't think there is a great answer for that.
As a person who's interested in linguistics, a linguistics minor, I mean, there's people who work in like literature or something who have a very clear like, no, this is what irony is. But as a linguist, I know it's like, well, word meanings shift over time, and if enough people say like this circumstance is ironic, even if they're misusing the word, if like culturally, if everyone comes to understand that's an ironic situation, well, then now that definition has been like it's encompassed that one way or another. So,
and as someone who has a minor in Alanis Morissette studies, I can conclusively
Thanks,
say,
NYU.
Yeah, exactly. I went to Gallatin.
Cool.
That one was for the
deep cut.
Go Violence. All right.
What we doing next?
Bios and trivia. Bios and trivia. Bios and trivia. Yeah. Scott, Zachary, Mark Grams Jr., Zachary, and
I would love to know how many out of our listenership get a Gallatin joke.
Yeah, well, Gretchen, who sings the
Yeah,
Bios and Trivia
that was my
theme,
only guess.
Hopefully she'll be ROFL on that one.
Okay, so out of the 92 episodes written by Rod Serling, this was arguably his favorite, though I have another source that said it was between this and another episode. This and The Invaders.
Okay. Well, he didn't write The Invaders, did he?
Maybe the source claims this is, of the ones he wrote, this was his favorite, whereas of the show, his favorites were
That's
this
so
or The
weird
Invaders.
and ironic because it's based off a short story.
Don't trust everything you hear on a podcast,
Okay,
Fred.
all right. Move along.
Rated number 25 on TV Guide's 100 Most Memorable Moments in Television.
Yeah.
I kind of have to wonder when that survey happened.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of shocking moments in the last few years. I mean, I feel like the Red Wedding might have bumped that down a couple pegs.
Yeah,
but
and that episode of Animals versus Humans when the orangutan beats the Navy
Exactly.
SEAL. Yeah.
Rod Serling's closing narration was part of a quote from John Steinbeck's classic novel.
Richard II.
Right,
Yes.
exactly. Burgess Meredith starred in a film adaptation of Of Mice and Men 20 years earlier.
Yeah.
The quote is based on a poem by Robert Burns.
Oh, man, a lot
I
of
will-
going back there.
Yeah, I won't read it.
Yeah.
But one of 4 times Serling used mid-episode narration. The exterior library steps bit was filmed months later. They were also used in the movie The Time Machine and in the episode A Nice Place to Visit.
Right, like
I
the
find-
heaven, or quote-unquote heaven,
Yeah.
records.
In 1960, the director John Brahm was awarded a Directors Guild Award for his work on this episode.
Not according to Martin Grams Jr. He says that
Okay.
for some reason in multiple guides that information has been printed and reprinted, but it's not true. He lost that year, actually.
But he was nominated.
He was nominated, that is true.
But he did not win.
Did not
'cause
win.
He's a big old loser.
Yeah, exactly. If anyone's a big old loser, it's the director of this episode.
Okay, and here we go for Pedant Zone.
All right.
Mr. Bemis expects to live years and years and years post-attack. In 1959, the effects of nuclear fallout were still under initial study and not widely understood. We see Bemis emerging from the bank vault more or less immediately after a thermonuclear blast. That's an assumption. Bomb shelter protocol says to wait at least 2 weeks for the worst of the radioactivity to decay. Eating packaged food that was probably irradiated, etc., etc. So even with his glasses, Bemis would not have lived to enjoy his books for very long.
Yeah.
Different point. And we don't know what kind of bomb landed. It's a fictional story, so...
Yeah, I think whoever made
know.
that comment was working for the bomb shelter industry.
yeah,
Big
totally.
bomb shelter, they call it.
So what's Graham's got to say?
Well, Grams has a lot of interesting stuff that kind of is related to the fact that there were many other episodes that had a similar kind of plot to this one that were submitted before the Twilight Zone was really up and running. And this one kind of just won out as the one that was like about survivors of a nuclear bomb, the one that they were going to do, because obviously this is very much on people's mind and in the thick of the Cold War. Weirdly, it's written by Serling, but it's based off a short story by Lynn Venable, who's the author of the original story. Did you have a chance to track it down? Because I did.
I did not. Thanks for sending it over to me. Makes for really good podcasting.
Well, I read it about 12 minutes ago, so I read it while you were doing your Serling intro. It's interesting because it's almost exactly the episode, like beat to beat. It almost reads like a pitch for an episode of the Twilight Zone. So it's just interesting that it was changed so little. Serling, I think, punched up the dialogue and came up with a title. I don't think that's in the story, but I think it's very true to the original, which is interesting. But apparently, in the episode, Bemis's wife's name is Helen, and apparently Burgess Meredith was married to a woman named Helen. Prior to this episode, they'd gotten a divorce, and so Graham's surmises that maybe Burgess took some perhaps perverse pleasure in having his shrewish wife be named Helen in the episode. He also catalogs all the ways it's been referenced in pop culture, like Futurama, family. I mean, this is just one of the most referenced episodes. So that's it for Graham's.
Burgess Meredith played Henry Bemis. He was also in Printer's Devil, The Obsolete Man, and Mr. Dingle the Strong.
Right.
Let's close it out for the Burge.
I still feel like Printer's Devil is he had the most fun with that one,
Yeah.
Obsolete Man, I feel, is a little overrated. It's a little sanctimonious. Then we got Dingle, which is Dingle, and then we got this. I just think Printer's Devil is the most fun. I don't know. This one is probably a little, there's more range to it, but
Right.
I think it's a 2-way tie for me. What about you?
I agree that Printer's Devil, it's fun to see him chew the scenery
Yeah.
in that manner instead of like in the dingle way.
Yeah.
And I do agree that Obsolete Man, he gets a good monologue here or there, but it can be a little preachy. My instinct wouldn't have been this episode, but rewatching it, just feeling like the first half of it, not so much. He's kind of just like boing with big glasses,
Yeah.
but the second half, the back half of this episode, I think he really shines and gets to do a lot. So I'd say I agree. It's pretty close, but I think this is, it's as rightly remembered as his, best performance, most iconic anyway, certainly.
Yeah.
Jacqueline DeWitt played his wife Helen. Vaughn Taylor played Carsville, I believe the bank manager.
He was the mean old boss in the Horace Ford, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was actually a 5-timer.
Oh, wow.
He was in Salvador Ross, Horace Ford, Sing the Body Electric, Still Valley in this episode.
Well, we haven't seen Still Valley, so we'll have to close out the
we'll
Vaughn
save that
Taylor
one.
oeuvre later on.
Leela Bliss played Mrs. Chester. Some eagle-eyed folks might recognize her as Miss Shellhammer in the original Miracle on 34th Street.
Oh.
She was the woman who got like really sauced and was on the telephone with it upside down.
That's
it's
kinda
a funny
fun.
little bit.
That's kinda
Robert Haynes was a bank customer. He was uncredited in The Silence and Trouble with Templeton. Like you said, written by Serling, based story by Lynn Venable, directed by John Brom. He did 12 episodes all told. We still need to watch one more, so we'll reserve that. Even though, obviously, it's not DGA winner material.
Yes, right.
I think we can agree, nominee.
Yeah, for sure.
It's very solidly done.
Yeah.
I think maybe the instincts on the first half, maybe there was be a way to like buff out that transition a little better. But overall, I think it's pretty good work. Unfortunately, we don't have a connection to Mystery
man.
Science Theater 3000 this week.
So kind of bummed out about one of our last iconic episodes.
We're gonna go out like that, like chumps.
I know. Maybe I'll do some digging and I'll fix it in post
Yeah.
or something. I feel like we should give a shout out to, I don't know if Henry Grace did this episode, but the set design is like unbelievable. I don't know if he specifically was the one to do it, but I almost feel like when we say the directing's great, it's almost like the Apocalypse was.
Yeah, the production design original
was great.
all around. Yeah. IMDb gives this episode a 9.1.
Very high, if not the highest.
Yeah, that's one of the tops, certainly.
Yeah. I felt like I wanted to put this episode off towards the end of the run because I didn't want it to be a bummer for me to say I don't like it that much. But rewatching it, I appreciate a little bit more than I used to. The episodes of the Twilight Zone that I feel like I really love are they're like short stories and you get drawn into them. And this one really is, maybe it's not a fable exactly, but it's kind of like a punchline almost. And I think that Burge does a good job and the Apocalypse is good, but it's not really like a great plot or a great story with great characters. It's very just kind of like it's like archetypes. And I like it. I just don't think it's like, for me, anywhere near like my top 5 or even 10. How about you?
I'd say I understand why it gets put so high.
Yeah.
And I do think it's very well constructed. I agree. You more or less have just everyone but Bemis certainly is just a stereotype, archetype, whatever. The bad boss, the shrew wife. Bemis starts out as just being, kind of the nebbish, nerdy, whatever. But I feel like they do let him have more moments as the episode plays out. You do have to just give it up for having a solid twist that is, you say it's like it's a very Twilight Zone twist, but few of the Twilight Zone twists are honestly like this cruel. So it does stand out a little bit.
It's kind of like
I don't know,
nihilists. It's like Friedrich Nietzsche's The Twilight Zone, very much like the other one. It's a cookbook is a hits home
that's pretty dark.
Oh no, it's very dark, but it has a meaning. You know what I mean? Like the meaning of that is like it reveals the fact that we've become beware of strangers bearing gifts. This one, the meaning is just like life's it has a meaning, but the meaning is almost like the absence of meaning,
which could be interesting in itself. So I do think it's very, very good. I personally wouldn't say it's one of my very favorites, but I think it's hard to deny, especially the back 15 minutes in the twist launch it way up into the stratosphere for me. So not quite a 10 for me, but I'm going to go ahead and say a 9+.
Whoa.
It set a standard, I think. You got to remember this was also, the 8th episode they did? Yeah. I feel like it really laid a groundwork for what this show was and could be, both from effects and production design standpoint that we've talked about, from the kind of stories they could tell, from the way they could tell the stories. It's important. It's, I think, enjoyable enough.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If they hadn't done it, we wouldn't be spending our Sunday evening.
Exactly.
Yeah. No,
I could maybe revise it down to a 9, but I don't think I can go lower than
I
that.
kind of had been like sort of impishly looking forward to like giving it like a 5, just to kind of like
Right.
be a punk, but it's not that. I think to me it's like an 8-. I understand why it's iconic. I appreciate it. I appreciate a lot about it, but I don't really enjoy it. I don't know. It's just got a minus feel to me. I don't know. I don't know how to explain it. Like it's like
No, it's
it's
fine.
up there, but it's like up there minus.
Sure.
All right. Cool. Well, that closes out Time Enough at Last, which probably was a request from somebody.
Yeah, that was requested by Anonymous on Tumblr and Alex on Gmail.
Yeah. Next week, we're really counting down to the very, very end of our little podcast here. I don't know if we'll be doing a request or we'll be doing one that we just want to do, but stay tuned to our social media. Write into us. And there's lots of ways to do it. John, what are they?
You can get in touch with us via email at twilightpwn, pwn@gmail.com. You can get in touch with us on Twitter at twilightpwn. You can check out our website, twilightpwn.tumblr.com. You can like us on Facebook. You can listen to us on any kind of podcatcher app. And you could subscribe to us in iTunes. If you're over there, if you leave us a rating or review, we really appreciate those.
So, yeah, I don't know. I guess if a nuclear bomb went off and you could only read one author, I don't know. It's hard for me to think of a questione. Do you think you could be satisfied? I know that you are a big reader, even though you mock my antiquarian book fair.
Sure. I wouldn't be like running to the Walmart, I don't think, looking for in the firearm section too fast. I do, handle being alone a little better than some, but I don't know. I mean, it certainly wouldn't be ideal, but
yes, no, you wouldn't react to it as positively as Bemis did.
Right.
I'm like, oh yes, of course I too would read the great works of literature, but I bet I'd just try and find like a working Game Boy or something like that. Probably fritter away eternity, like back reading Gawker or whatever.
More or less, yeah. Yeah,
Cool.
Definitely.
Talk to you next week, Jim.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Our sympathies are supposed to lie with Bemis, and they do some things that
Did you just
make
say
it work,
penis?
but no, I said Bemis.
Oh, I don't know. I heard that as penis. Sorry. Just trying to create more red hot, uncensored material. Start over.